Hey, thanks for joining me. This is Drew from Retro Cemetery. I'm just going to go over the Sprite editor on GameMaker Studio 2.3 because I actually think it's a lot better than people realize. I'm going to show you some things in two parts. I'm going to do one that is more on the animation and one that is just on the tools. So, from here, let's go ahead and get started. The name of your sprite is up here at the top left. Below that is the size of your image. You can change the size of the actual image itself or just the canvas, which is an important distinction. Scale image will increase if you have a sprite already drawn on there. It'll increase the actual size of the sprite. And then if you just resize the canvas, then the sprite itself will stay the same and the canvas will grow around it. You can import your images here, but we're going to actually draw our own. Also, it's important to note, you can change the frames per second right here, and in GameMaker Studio 1.4 and 2, I think the default was 15, and on this one the default is 30, so remember that if you're coming from the other ones. So let's edit the image. We're just going to go over each tool real quick. So up here, you've got onion skin. If you want to repeat your animation or ping pong back and forth or just play through it, you can add frames from here and you can remove them by hitting X. You can Control C and V, copy and paste those. But we're going to go over that more in depth in the next video. For now, let's start with this. This is the grid. These are your grid options. You can turn your grid on or off, and those are for referencing and whatnot. You can change the color of your grid. You can also change the opacity of your grid. So you can change the alpha, and if alpha of 0 is gone, alpha of 255 is full. You can change the grid size. And you can also choose if you want your lines to snap to the grid. And if you do that, it always starts at the top left. So you can do that. See how they snap? They don't really have free form. Let's go back to normal on this. This next one zooms out. This next one zooms reset. So that's like 100%. That's like your standard 32 by 32 pixels. Up here, zoom in. I personally like to hold down the control key on my keyboard and use the mouse wheel to zoom in or out. And you can also click in the mouse wheel to move it around. This centers it, and then this gives you this arranged view. You can split it horizontally or vertically, which I've never actually used, but it seems like it could be really useful. So that's something to think about in the future. All right, next, we're going to go over to our brushes. You've got your standard brushes, which just start as squares. Oops. If you hit the D button, you can draw. And you can change your brush size there. And you've got like circle brushes on the bottom part. And these are just your defaults, but it's actually very easy to create your own brush. Here, I'll show you right now. Switch over to the black. This swaps between your left and right colors. I'm just going to do smiley face. And then I'm going to hit S or use the rectangle select tool. Highlight it, and then I'm going to hit copy, Control C, and then all of a sudden I've got a brush that looks like a smiley face. How about that? So there, that's your new brush. And that won't stay there forever. It only pretty much stays there until you get rid of the sprite. But you can actually copy and paste those brushes across multiple sprites. So if you've got one that you really like, you can use it in other ones, but don't be surprised if they don't show up in future sprites. So the next thing we're going to do is you can draw with this. You can hit E, and that brings you to our erase tool, of course. You can also change the size of what you're working with up here, and if you want it to be smooth or not, which adds like a little bit of an outline. I guess it's a lower opacity. I've not really used that one much, but there it is if you want it. Next we have the fill tool, F, which just fills in a section that's closed off. So for instance, if I wanted to fill in this white square, I could do so just like that because it is a closed. It's closed, it's not open. If I were to do this, Now if I try to use the fill bucket, it got out because it's not a closed environment. You already saw that? This is an interesting one. Let's see, we're gonna go with this. Turn smooth off. We're just gonna get some random color blocks. This next tool is called color remove, and you can highlight it with, you can use the hotkey H to use it, and it will get rid of any unique color. And if you've got multiple colors that are very similar, I think those are, you can actually change the tolerance, and the higher up you go, the tolerance is like how many shades away from the target is it, and if it's 0 shades away, then it will not mistake them. But the further you get away, it'll actually start absorbing other colors that are pretty similar to it. See how these colors are similar enough to this bright red that if my tolerance is way up high, it'll actually grab all those. See? And then the same thing with V, color replace. You can use the V key to get to color replace. So I can start replacing colors, which is really useful. I love those keys. Those are two of my favorite. I actually use those all the time. Next, we've got the line tool, which you can use to make straight lines. And if you hold down Shift, it'll snap to one of the up, down, left, right, or diagonal directions. Very useful, very useful. Next, we've got the square, the outline. I'm sorry, the rectangle tool. You hit R. It'll create outlines. If you hit Shift and R, it'll go to the fill version of that. And if you hold in Shift, it'll actually stay a square, an even square the entire time. And if you hold in Alt, it'll grow out from the center instead of the corner that you clicked on. And if you hold in Alt and Shift, it'll be a perfect square out from the center of which you clicked. Boom, just like that. Very useful stuff. Same thing with circle, which you can hit C to access. You've got your regular circle. You've got your outline circle. You've got your perfect circle no matter where you're going, or you let go of Shift. And it's pretty freeform. Hold in Shift, it stays like that. Alt, it grows out from the center. And Alt and Shift, it stays an even circle and grows out from the center. Next, we're going to go to the polygon tool, where you click once, click twice. Actually, you can hold it down like the line tool, and then when you get a third one, it'll change as a polygon. How about that? And again, you can have it be a fill tool as well. Next is the arc tool. Go back to black. You can choose like kind of the trajectory of where it's going to aim, and then you do a second one, and then it forms a line between the two. And then you can change how it curves and whatnot. And then from there you can actually grab these points and reshape how they're moving, which is a really good way if you're having trouble getting like just the right line. This is how you do it. It's a great way to deal with that. Very useful stuff. Next is the text tool, which you can just hit T to access. It'll look pretty good, but if you have anti-alias on, it does not look very good. At size 10, that's just not great. You do have fonts here and you have styles. I personally like turning anti-alias off, especially for such a small font. If it was a much bigger font, maybe it would benefit you to have anti-alias on, but with it only being size 10, it's probably not going to look great. Next, you've got the color picker. Which most of you probably already know. If you hit O, you can select that. And if you look over here, You can actually right click and it'll assign it to the right click, or if you left click, it'll grab whatever color you clicked on and assign it to your left color. Next, we're gonna do the select tool. Actually, let's bring this back. If you hit S, you get the select tool, and you can highlight things. You can copy them and make them a brush, or you can highlight them and get rid of them, whatever you need to do. Next we've got, and that's S. Next, if you use Q, we've got the paint select button, which is a little weirder. You can actually like kind of paint your selection just like that. And so you could fill it if you wanted or whatever you need to do. Kind of an interesting tool. Magic Wand is interesting because it picks all of a like thing. Oops. Let's go ahead and fill that in. Okay, Magic Wand is going to grab everything that I click on. So like I clicked on white, so it grabbed this whole thing. But what happens if you have ones that are disconnected? It still only grabs the one that I clicked on, as long as it's a closed environment. And as long as the tolerance is low. If I crank the tolerance up, of course it grabs other things that are similar to it. But if I turn off contiguous mode, then it actually grabs all of the color that I clicked on. It's really useful. That's a wonderful thing. It's great. You can use Magic Wand quite a bit. Or not, I don't know. It's up to you. But I find it really useful. Next, we've got the rotation tool, which if you hold down shift, it'll kind of snap to one of the 8 cardinal directions. But if it's anything but up, down, left, or right, it's gonna look hideous. It's like, there it's just facing the other way. Now I can do it sideways. That's great. But what if I use the rotation tool by hitting U and I just turn it like halfway? It's anti-aliased and it looks really messy. It's not really that great. Next, if I hit these two buttons, flip it vertically or horizontally by hitting X and Y, very appropriate. So you can just flip it vertically by hitting Y or horizontally by hitting X. And then this tool just grabs things and moves it around. And there you go, oh, also, actually, you've got a lot of layers too, which is interesting. You can do some cool stuff with the layers. So let's say I draw this beautiful smiley face. And I want to add on to it, but I'm afraid of having to erase or go over it or anything like that. I can add another layer, and I can start drawing eyebrows, and a mustache, and a beautiful nose. There you go. But if I don't like those and I decide, no, I liked it better as a smiley face, I can turn that layer off, and it's non-destructive to the layer beneath it, which is great. You can also double click on the layer, you can name it, you can change the blend mode, which is kind of weird. I'll go over that later, a little different. And then you can also change the opacity. And if you were to use M to grab the pan tool, see if it's overlapping now, and I change the blend type. Subtract means it's only gonna have the layer under it where it overlaps. Multiply is only going to show up where it overlaps with the layer under it. And then add just adds them together. So like if you had, kind of hard to do with, let's see. It's on add right now. Yeah, it's on add right now. So it's gonna add the colors up and it's gonna like make it much whiter. It's gonna add the lightness together where they overlap, but only where they overlap. It definitely is kind of weird looking. If I hit subtract, it only has a negative image of what's under it. Multiply only adds where it's underneath it. Pretty interesting stuff. And then you can also add groups. You can be like, I'm going to put these two into layer group 1, and that's going to be the smiley face group or whatever. You can also delete layers. You can duplicate layers, delete layers, add group, add layer, merge layers together. Like, say I really like the way that looks, I can merge the layer down, and now that's a solid layer. Alright, and I think that just about covers most of the sprite editor. I hope you found this really useful. Remember that you can get some pretty cool little functions out of holding down Shift or Alt with the circle, especially. The Alt is really useful there. And I'm sorry I don't have a Mac. I know those keys are on a Mac keyboard. I've never really used one, so I don't remember what they are off the top of my head, so I apologize for that. But yeah, there you go. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. Hopefully you like this video enough to give it a like and subscribe. It helps me out. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, make them watch my boring videos. But there you go. I hope this helps you out, and I'll do one on animation next.